So
He's now inside.
this is Roland Anderson. He is 25 years old. He's not electrical engineer. He's a software engineer for Dell, and he's a husband and a father to a lot of doggies and cats and birds and everything else. So I want to ask you a couple questions. The first one I wanted to ask is,
Let's go. Good boy.
do you think there are gender roles in society?
Yes. Well, I mean, are or should be. Does that
Well,
make sense?
are there gender roles in society, and should there be gender roles?
I think culturally, yes, we have different gender roles currently, if that makes sense. I would say typically the kind of, at least when I grew up, it was kind of typical for the husband or male figure in the family, I guess, to go and work and try to have a job and like be gone all day working at the job, and then the wife to stay home and take care of the kids or whatever. George, get back here. Sit.
Come on, George, you're a part of my interview.
Excuse me. I think that's changing a lot. A lot of, I'd say most people I know, both couples, or both people in the relationship work. And I don't think that I don't think it should matter necessarily. I appreciated that I had a parent home while I was a kid, but I don't think it matters which parent that is necessarily. I mean, like, I'm a guy, but I really like cooking, but stereotypically it would be the woman that would, traditionally did the cooking, but I like it, so I would feel bad if I weren't allowed to cook, and I feel like that kind of extends to probably all the rest of the gender roles, if that's not oversimplifying it.
Why do you think there are gender roles in our society?
Goodness, that's a good question.
Why, thank you.
I'd have to do more research to know the actual history on it, but I would imagine culture and I can imagine George, come here. Religion playing a huge part in some of that, if that makes sense. But honestly, I'm not really completely sure. I guess probably for the same reason there have been a lot of other differences between groups in society, cultural habits or misunderstandings that are propagated over time. Right?
Yeah. I assume so, yeah.
I guess. I don't know. Sorry, I'm not a very good interviewer.
You're fine.
Interviewee.
How have you been affected by gender roles in your life?
For me, I guess it was interesting that, like, when I was growing up, it was always just kind of a given that I would be going to school and trying to get a job, and you and I have talked about how there's a chance if you end up finishing your degree, becoming a teacher, that I might end up being the stay-at-home parent, and that would be, that sounds awesome to me, but that's not something that I ever even would have considered when I was, it's almost like I didn't have the option to think of that, if that makes sense, growing up.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that that's necessarily, being prepared for having a job isn't exactly a bad thing. Otherwise affected, I feel like something that does bug me is I'm not the most, bless you, I'm not the most macho guy out there, I guess. I'm not a big guy, I don't have, I have long hair, I don't like football, and that kind of that gets me a lot of, feels like there's a lot of, I get crap from other guys sometimes, and so that's kind of rough, or even girls, actually. Like, that's something I've dealt with that I guess could be attributed to a gender role. And then I would say also like something that's affected me as a guy is that guys are kind of expected not to share their feelings, like be a man, hold it in type of thing. And that's something that as I've tried to deal with mental illness and a couple of other, you know, and some issues that I've had over the years, that's made it even harder growing up thinking like, okay, hold everything in. There are things I could have dealt with, you know, years ago that it took me forever to deal with because I thought I was, George, sit. He's very excited, which is why he's inside. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm
rambling
curious.
a little, I'm sorry, I've still got flu.
No, you're okay.
Good grief, come here.
Well, I'm curious, like you mentioned holding your feelings. Do you think those stereotypes were perpetuated by the male figures and the female figures in your life, like your parents and your grandparents?
Probably to an extent, yeah. I mean, my grandpa was a Navy captain, and his way of life is very like rough, manly kind of, you know. He's a nice guy, like, but like when my dad was a kid, one time his older sister was like, "Hey, come look at this," and my grandpa for years had always been like, "Hey, you're gonna stay right here." My grandpa for years had always been like, "Oh, I hate cats. I don't like cats. So damn cats," you know. And my sister came and got, or my dad's sister came and got him, and they went and snuck up to the top of the stairs, and they were looking, and my grandpa was sitting there loving on the cat and petting the cat, and you know, giving it treats and everything. And so then she said, "Watch this," and she said, "Hi, Dad," and she like popped up at the top of the stairs, and he put the cat down. He's like, "Stupid cat." And that was just my grandpa for years. He's gotten a lot better, but it's like that I think came in a large part from the Navy. He had this idea that he had to be like this tough, unfeeling kind of person to be a good man. And not just from the Navy, that came from his dad a lot too. And that kind of got passed down to my dad, and that's how he dealt with things when I was a kid too, and that was really hard. And that in turn I think got passed on to me. So I think in that kind of way, unintentionally, my parents passed those on to me, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you were to ask them, they wouldn't care, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like my dad does, you know. So I guess that's another way my parents didn't pass it along, is that my dad does all the cooking. My mom has a job, you know. Like there's plenty of ways my parents don't fit the gender stereotypes, and so in that way they helped me see around them better. But I think unintentionally you get, I mean, just culturally you get some expectations for gender roles just based on what culture you grow up in.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone intends it to, but it's just kind of, I mean, unless you're extremely careful, you're not going to raise your kid without cultural influence, you know? Maybe I don't even think that you should necessarily, so.
Yeah. So you're
I
in...
feel like I'm rambling. I'm
no,
sorry.
you're fine. This is actually really interesting. So you're in an industry, you're in the technology industry, and it's very heavily, there's a lot of men, generally speaking. Have you seen a change in these past years as you've been in this industry, and have you seen more women go into roles? Do you think that's an issue still?
Honestly, most of the women I know that I work with, and there are actually quite a lot, that once you like get up into the like in my immediate team there wasn't, but once I started working outside that team with a lot of other teams, there are a lot of women that I work with, and they all got their degrees in like the 80s, you know, and so interestingly, there haven't, like when we've been advertising for jobs the last few years, we haven't had a single woman apply that I know of. Except for one, she really didn't work out, but that had nothing to do with her being a woman, she was just an idiot. But that's a long story for another day. But George. But like all the positions and all the groups that have started and everything, it's not like we're restricting the job postings, if that makes sense. But just no girls apply. And I've actually they've had these like diversity trainings and stuff where they talk about trying to encourage more women to be in more of a balance of women and men in the workplace, and it just hasn't. I mean, I guess I'm kind of at a loss as to what to do, because I would say most of the time when I'm working with somebody, especially when they're overseas and I'm just working, I'm typing a message to them over the computer, I have no idea what race they are. I have no idea what gender they are. I can't even pronounce their name most of the time, So I just don't. I don't really. I don't really know what to think, I guess, if that makes sense. I'm also a little younger than a lot of the people that I have been working with, so I'm kind of curious to see if people from our generation start coming in, if there are more women as the workforce gets younger, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I have heard some of the women that I work with talk about how hard it was for them in school with some of the things that they had to deal with as far as like being the only girl in a computer class or something where all the guys are like, oh, a girl, and just, you can imagine you want to talk about stereotypes, programmer stereotypes, they're generally true.
Well, so I wanted to ask you a couple more questions, but something you said was really interesting to me. How can you, because, we have nieces, we have nephews, we have children within our influence. How can we make it so that women feel safer, especially our children? How can we go forward and help our girls to feel safe to want to be an engineer? I know my sisters, they're both engineers, and they're both, many of our female relatives are very mechanically minded and all that kind of stuff. But how can we encouraging
them to do whatever they're interested in, regardless of whether it's, I do remember when I was a kid how now I'm getting my stories confused, but I do remember a few like friends I'd have where their parents were like, oh, well, you don't want to do that for a living kind of thing, trying to, and my parents did that a lot, but it was more like, it wasn't gender-based in our case, but in a lot of families I think it was. Like, oh, well, you don't want to be a, fireman, you're a girl, that type of thing. And, ironically, she did end up being a fireman. But, I think with our nieces, so for example, one thing, George, come here, stop, sit now, sit, George, sorry. One thing with our nieces that I want to make sure we do is, and our nephew, is like if they're interested in something that we do or something that we like, to be able to encourage them to learn more about it regardless of who they are, One example that comes to mind is I love working on cars, and that was something that it's actually, I would say it's way harder these days to find a girl that works on cars than it is to find a girl engineer, at least in my experience. And I don't know why that is. I guess I would assume that a lot of girls just aren't encouraged to be interested in it. Mm-hmm. But if any of our nieces want to come learn how to work on cars, I would be thrilled.
I know one of them has shown interest. Granted, she's 4, but
yeah,
and she wanted to help you with tools and
That's
start throwing tools around.
And I would love to work on cars with her just as much as And I think that our brother and sister-in-law are a great example of that with their son Caleb. His favorite color is pink, and he loves garbage trucks. But they don't encourage, anything either direction. So he just has pink garbage trucks, which I think is awesome. think there's anything wrong with, you know.
Yeah.
He's 2.
Yeah, he's yeah, it's pink, sparkly, garbage
Yeah,
trucks.
when I was 2, I wanted to be a fire truck. Not a firefighter. I wanted to be a fire truck.
And the last question, just thinking about, like, do you think that toys in general, by feminizing, you know, the quote girly toys unquote, and then masculizing the, you know, masculine, I mean, we were looking for a pink garbage truck and it was almost impossible to find, right?
Well, I mean,
or it was,
I think that's because most of the garbage trucks are garbage truck colored. In fairness. Like,
yeah,
like that's just because, you know, like the vast majority, I mean, we have a toy garbage truck in the other room that's waste management colors, because that's what all garbage trucks in the U.S. are colored
yeah.
by. So it's not, I don't think that's necessarily like an intentional gender branding, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I do notice that a lot with, I'd almost say more with girls' toys.
Yeah.
Like, I always feel like you have like the general kind of kids' toys, Nerf guns, games, you know, and then you have like the Barbie section, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it's been a while since I've been toy shopping. But yeah, I did notice that always kind of affected my sister. She felt like she could only pick from the pink section, you know?
Oh, okay. That's interesting. And you were more free to pick from the neutral colors?
Yeah, but then also I didn't want to pick from the pink section because that was for girls.
Oh, okay.
See?
Okay.
And girls were gross. I don't know why, but... Maybe because I had a sister.
Yeah, maybe that was why.
Sisters are gross.
Do you still think girls are gross?
No.
Oh, good.
I married one.
Oh, good. Well, thank you so much, and I guess that concludes our interview.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.